Hello, good morning, Chicago.
Hello, Martin. Hello,
Yes,
Hey,
Rich.
yep,
hey, Michael. Hey, Martin.
yes, you're both early. Okay, so nice to meet you again. Good. Uh, yeah, I thought about a lot, yeah, about you too, um, because Rich, in the first place, I got a new insight into serial innovators versus entrepreneurs.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, I I must admit that I I had a wrong picture of serial innovators.
Okay.
Um, the reason being an entrepreneur myself, I always thought that we entrepreneurs are superior, and those innovative guys who I'm now how to say um, uh, I'm a bit sarcastic now, or I'm exaggerating. That those guys who are innovative and hiding in industry, they just do not have the same guts as we entrepreneurs. And you could feel from the smile in my voice that I'm not serious about that anymore, or I wasn't really like that. But I was always a bit looking down on serial innovators in industry. And I'm now, I have this TUM Asia course, and I did not yet start it because I thought that it's not mature enough yet. There are a few things missing, and once I started to work on it, I realized that um, this innovation course, if it's really good, then it should be something that is different from what is known out there in the industry, I believe. And to make it different, I would start with the people and not with the innovation, because innovation without the right people is not possible. It would always be something incremental, and you need those. Roland is now in. Actually, we started even before the time. So, if you want to start with innovation and you do it from the outcome, then it's just the same as what everybody in innovation is doing. They see people something as clients, like students in a classroom, and then they try to teach them how to innovate. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but that's what I see when all the innovation courses that I have checked so far, about roughly 10, they do it like that. They look at the business model and then they tell you what technology readiness level you are at, and then they say, now for innovating better, you need to apply this tactics or that thing or this or that or this or that, and so it goes. And you can run uh, um, even a lecture on that. I have seen lectures, but not yet the lecture notes, I must say, about innovation. But I want to do something very different. I want to start with the people. And when you start with the people, then of course I have this entrepreneur test, and it's there on my website for a very long time. It starts with personality tests in the first place, because I learned that people who innovate have a specific personality, and they're very rare. And then I was always looking into comparison, because most of the people that I meet, they are either they run their own company or they start a new company, a startup. And then I was looking for, now there are also those innovators that are also very creative, but for some reason they never make it to become self-employed. And And if you remember the times when Bruce Wojcik was still here, he always said, serial innovators are like entrepreneurs, but they just do not want the risk, the financial risk of running their own company. But in the meantime, when I look at it, I believe that serial innovators, because they also need some political and psychological skills, have chosen that way, not but because of risk avoidance, but because they see that they are in an organization where they have a much bigger lever. And this is it. While entrepreneurs are quite rare, serial innovators in industry are almost non-existent. They're never there. A company of 1,000 has maybe one or two serial innovators. A company of 10,000, often none, because they have already been driven out by the bureaucracy or because frustration or whatever. And serial innovators, when they exist and when they are allowed to function, they deliver 100 times the financial impact of one entrepreneur, simply because they have a much larger basis for putting the innovation into practice, a much longer lever. And they do that. I mean, entrepreneurs, they may succeed or fail, but if they fail, then usually they fail quietly, and then they try the next thing, and then you see them very often as old inventors. As a patent attorney, I meet some of them. And when you look at the serial innovators, they are, I believe, the much more interesting people because they have deep technical mastery, they have a sharp market insight, then they are savvy when it comes to organizational politics, and they persist often over a decade or more. And they also have a willingness to fight for ideas within an inherently rigid system. So I believe serial innovators are exceptional. Entrepreneurs are uncommon. But what is more rare? I would say exceptional. And yeah, I believe that companies make a big mistake when they are not looking for serial innovators at a very early stage. And I have a story for you, because now when I do all this, I remember all the stories when I was in industry as a very young engineer, and I never really understood how big industry works. But that's when I tell you this insight from writing my script for the lecture, the university lecture, does it resonate, or is it something that I'm completely wrong?
Say, Martin, Michael here. So a minute ago, you used a key word that came to mind when you started this discussion, that is financial. So I've got another book for you to take a look at the summary. I just
Yeah,
pulled it
okay.
up.
Before you give me the book, can you please give me feedback on what I just said?
Yeah, I'm about to. So the reason I pulled up this book, they talked about the importance of monetizing. So the success, I mean, if you invent a new vaccine, the money might come later. But they talked about the author refers to Porsche, Draeger, Swarovski, LinkedIn, Uber. He cites many examples. And he says the interesting thing is many companies use what's called spray and pray. So you know the failure rate, Martin. So
Yes.
the idea that he's talking about is the success, at least in monetizing. He starts with the idea of price. And of course, years ago, we had experts on
Michael,
4x4. Yeah, well, look at the book, Monetizing Innovation. I think you'll like it.
okay. So now, or if you don't give me feedback on what I just said, maybe Rich, because you are a serial innovator, right? From by history.
Well, but Martin, here, so the word you said financial, that's what turned me on to
Yeah.
turn on my microphone. And so my response to everything you're saying is I think you're putting too much weight on personalities and not enough on financial performance. So the market, unfortunately or fortunately, views success in terms of how much money do you make. And there are people with 50 patents and they haven't monetized any of them. Then there's other people that have 2 or 3 and each one's $100 million. How do you explain the difference with your personality model? You know, some are success and some fall on their face.
Rich, what is your take?
So my take on what you described is I agree with part of it, but I think the starting with people idea is an intriguing approach, right? But what I wouldn't do is I wouldn't, have everybody in the room take the test and then tell them, there's only 2 of you that are innovative, right? I mean,
Of course not.
that's not the reason they're there. So, just a bit of coaching. The thing that I think is different about an entrepreneur and a serial innovator is this. A serial innovator, I agree with Bruce from the standpoint that they don't want the risk of the company on them. They don't want that burden. They just want to innovate. They just want to, and maybe not even innovate. They just want to do something, right? Whether it's invention, whether it's design, understanding a marketplace, before they even pick up a pencil to design something, to design a solution. They want to understand problems. So I think starting with people is an interesting approach, and I would agree with that's novel, and that that could be attention getting for the course, etc. But going back to the difference now, I think the entrepreneur is somebody that has a particular driving force within that person that says, I'm not working for somebody else. I am strictly focused on working for myself to create something that is going to be monumental in their terms. It's going to be significant, and maybe that's just a hobby business. Everybody talks about the unicorn, but face it, not every company can be a unicorn, right? So, for lots of different reasons, but if they have a hobby business that generates $2, $3, $4 million a year, and that some people are satisfied with that, right? And but they continue to innovate within their own business, and albeit it might not be in the terms that that we're talking about, but they change their business model, they change their pricing strategy, they change locations, they change customers over a period of time, or they add products and services to their portfolio. And if you're not changing, you're dying, right? And so I think that there's plenty of entrepreneurs out there, right? A serial innovator to me is a more rare species, if you would. And and the reason I say that is because a good serial innovator is going to walk into a domain and be there. But the difference is that serial entrepreneur, or excuse me, that serial innovator is a person that, and frankly, I don't think they're good at politics at all. Quite frank, I don't think that they have a political bone in their body, and that's why most of them, even in Bruce's, in Bruce's book, he points out that some of them were ready to throw in the towel and quit, right? And that's because they aren't good at that. And what they do have in common is they have political cover. They have somebody within the company, within the organization, that is got them under their wing, and that person's taken a lot of heat on occasion for that serial innovator, because because that serial innovator is, either slow to come to a conclusion and start designing something. And, they seem to be stuck in, market research and understanding and looking for that big problem to understand that big
Mhm.
problem. And that takes time. You know, um, when I did a project when I first joined my former company, that I was hired for, I told my boss, I said, this is going to take a year of research. And, I took 11 months, right? But I turned it into a, multi-million dollar business, for the company. And, but, I used that all that time, and not to just use the time, but that's how long it took me to understand, the fit for the technology and understand, the market opportunities, because I did such a wide scan of industries. Basically I casted a very, very wide net to understand where this, potentially would generate not only revenue, but also profit, for the
Mhm.
company.
Yeah.
And, and I know that he took some heat, for me, during that 11 months period, because, there were plenty of people asking me, hey, when are you going to, get off the pot, so to speak, right? And get going. So, um, I think that's a big difference. I think the other difference is that, a serial, entrepreneur is, or serial innovator is, basically, looking at, the opportunity for, the company and how the company's resources and, capabilities can be leveraged best, right?
Mm.
And, that takes, you know, a good understanding of the company, its resource base, its, resources, and how those resources can be deployed. And so it's not, completely disruptive, to the organization. So I think that plays a big part, in the development of an idea, as well as, that ultimate commercialization.
Huh.
I'm going to add in one more attribute to the entrepreneur side. They
Okay.
seem to have more faith that they're going to make something exist that doesn't. And that's kind of the difference, I think, between the entrepreneur versus the innovator. The innovator, yeah, may have less risk and less faith in kind of putting in all that tech debt and before it translates into a viable product.
I mean, difficult to say because how to measure? There are so few serial innovators. I know two of them, or three, two or three. One is retired already, and he worked for Infineon, is a German-based semiconductor manufacturer. And the other one works for an SME, and what they call one of those 1,000 hidden champions. Yeah, and he's one of the key inventors, one of two key inventors, and the third one is his colleague. Well, the one does software, the other one does the mechanical parts, and they are both clear serial innovators. And yeah, I don't think that they care about the risk. They find that they have a much bigger lever and can do really good things. And and in my 30 years, I have seen maybe altogether 15 serial innovators also as a patent attorney, because I meet inventors often and I can tell immediately whether someone thinks out of the box and is very unconventional, and the other ones who are I would say linear thinkers and incremental innovators. That they're also not bad, but just a different type of job. And but I've met hundreds, yeah, if not 1,000, thousands of entrepreneurs, thousands of entrepreneurs. So
Yeah, I really think that the big difference is that a serial innovator that has the right backing and the right support within their organization, those guys or gals will stay within the company because, they have that support. Once that support is gone, or they perceive it to be gone or weakened substantially, then they're, at threat, right?
Yes.
And that's when they jettison and move on to a different firm or, do something different.
Become self-employed. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe, or
Yeah.
probably not. I think a lot of serial innovators are, they're happy within the safety of an organization, that they don't have to pay for and write checks for. They don't want to be burdened with all that.
Maybe. Yeah.
I think they just want to be, a domain leader and, basically a domain expert. And, I think the risk thing, I think they do everything up front to minimize the risk. And, I don't think that, they wake up in the morning and they do a risk analysis, every day on, the project, because frankly, they don't even know what it is yet. I mean, it takes them, some time to understand, understand the problem. And if they're even chasing the right problem.
Yes, that's the most important one, because a serial innovator would constantly check, am I using my time and effort for the right problem? Or am I wasting it on solving a problem that only I think that it exists?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Say, Martin, Bruce's book said something very interesting. I just pulled it up again. So in a small R&D organization, he said you'll have maybe 1 out of 50 that are serial. In a smaller organization, but bigger than R&D, you might have 1 in 200. But then he said in Fortune 200 companies, you're going to have 1 in 500. So there's your people model. And you always said at a big company, if the serial innovator ends up there, he gets frustrated with the bureaucracy and he checks out and goes somewhere else. So I think you're absolutely right. Bruce said that in the intro to his book. I remember reading it years ago. So if what you're saying is true, they're a very rare breed. And if someone in the HR department is looking to fill R&D positions, they're probably going to get lucky because 1 out of 50 will be exactly what you guys are talking about.
No, not 1 out of 50.
Well, Bruce says that, not me. It could be more. It could be more rare than that. And you're right, Martin. In a big company, Bruce says it's 1 out of 200 that are.
No, this is what I can tell you. I have done with my team more than 20,000 patents in my professional life over 30 years. 20,000 is a lot, maybe in average, one inventor has maybe 3 patent applications. So now divide 20,000 by 3, then you arrive at 7,000 people. I've spoken probably with half of them. And I remember maybe 15 serial innovators and thousands of entrepreneurs. And I believe, maybe it's not a good sample or so, but I believe it's not bad, because we had clients from very large, like with 5,000 patents over the 30 years, until companies with only 1 patent over 30 years. So I believe is pretty much taken from the real life, from the front line. And so that's also, I believe, is the real relationship. You have one serial innovator in industry, successful, who stays, and that one equals 500 entrepreneurs, I would say. And yeah, in 200, there's also distribution, because there are not many companies with 200 technicians or engineers. So I just wanted to tell you something. I've developed an online test based on what I learned in clinical psychology. And you find it in the 4x4 innovation group on LinkedIn. There's a link. I put it just 1 hour ago. And it would ask you 20 questions. And based on the 20 questions, it would determine whether you qualify for serial innovator or not. So far, Rich, that's for you. Don't tell them that they are not serial innovators. I need to gather some data. So I need to find a few hundred people who take the test and then follow up. And if you are in the entrepreneur corner, then you would get a second test, and that second test would tell you whether you are a serial innovator or an entrepreneur. And I will update it a bit with the questions that I've collected today, and I will keep further updating it. But you find it there. It's in the LinkedIn group that we have, and I would be very happy if you all could take it. So 4x4 Innovation Group on LinkedIn, and then it sits there. And I will now collect that information. I also have a entrepreneur test that takes about 20 hours tough work, both for the entrepreneur and for the analyst. I'm talking here about clinical analysis, because I'm using clinical psychology methods for that. And I would then, if I find the right people, then I would run the 10 deep tests on those, and then also publish the data at some point in time. But that's my deeper goal. And
hi, Martin. This is Coleman. Apologies for interrupting, but I guess so your goal is to collect data, but I still don't quite understand what the final purpose is. Like, why do you need to find these people?
I mean, number one, I want to get the toolbox that shows the young Martin of 35 years ago what he should have done or not done, or some guidance, right? Because I knew that I'm an inventor. I love inventing. I know that I can run a business, and I had invitations to join big companies like Siemens and so. I mean, as a or BMW, what else? BASF, yeah, you name them. All the big guys were after me because I was quite good. I was in the upper. I was in the 95% percentiles of my cohort in mechanical engineering. So but I knew that I won't fit in a industry career, because I also did not fit into a military career. So, which I tried, but I didn't like it, and they also didn't like it, or not as much as others. So I know that I'm not cut out for big organizations, and it's because of a lack of a political bone, as Rich, you put it. And so I want to gather data so that people can orientate themselves and know where they are, because I know that young people would like to have it, right? But no, there is nothing available out there for them now, more than 35 years ago, but very, very little. You can apply to the Founder Institute, and then they do a personality test on you, but they don't really tell you the outcome. They either take you up or not, and the personality test is one of the components. The second thing is, we have here this scientific data, and Michael just read to us that they say 1 in 200 is a serial innovator, and I say, yeah, maybe, but I don't believe it, because from my own measurement data, I would rather say 1 in 2,000 is a serial innovator, or 1 in 1,000.
Sorry, Martin. Bruce says it's 1 in 500 at Fortune 200 companies or so. I no longer have it on my screen, but
yeah, but
I think you and he probably agree.
yeah,
it's 1 in
so we
500.
talk about the same magnitude, but maybe it's different. I don't know. I wanted to confirm that from a different angle, namely using clinical psychology method for doing so. And number 3, I'm preparing my innovation course. I have 2 courses actually at the university in Singapore, and at least one of the lectures is about exactly that. So what is the material that you need, the human material to be innovative? And when I talk about innovation, I discern between incremental innovation and non-incremental innovation. And while I believe that 80% of the people that work in innovation are only able to do incremental innovation, or maybe, yeah, because they do not have so much creativity, or they do not have creativity at all. You would be surprised. For example, my measurements say that 60% of mankind does have zero creativity. Zero, literally zero, no creativity. And so I want to confirm that. And then I just read a paper yesterday that attributed that AI can replace only 50% of the innovation done out there. So AI is as creative as 50% of the people who work in creativity. And the 50% and the 60% are close enough to say that, oh, that I see that as a confirmation. See, so I'm just trying to build a node with several references to other measurement values just to verify that what human material you need to do what innovation. And yeah, so that's where I'm coming from. And there's only 4 of maybe 10 or 15 motives to go into that direction. I find it insightful. I have data, but still I want to double check and confirm whether my data tallies with what is out there, and I need more measurements. That's why I put up the online test, self-test.
So Martin, you mentioned that there's 2 tests. There's one that's 20 questions,
Yes.
and then I think you said the second one is 20 hours. Is that
20
right?
questions. The second test, the 2 tests, they're staggered. The first test is to find out whether you are in the 80 percentile. And the second test, also 20 questions, is for those in the 20%, in the upper 20% that already. And then we would discern between serial innovator and entrepreneur.
Okay, gotcha. I thought you said 20 hours, and I was like,
And then independent of that, I have a complete analysis of what a clinical psychologist probably would do. And that's 10 tests. And each test would take something like half an hour or 1 hour of your time, plus you as a clinical psychologist, you need to put in time and evaluate what is the outcome and do a few, put all your knowledge. And that's a second test. So I can do with those who passed or who gave me the data for the first two tests, I can then pair with the 10 comprehensive self-tests of the clinical psychology.
yeah, gotcha. Okay.
And then try to tally the percentages with the measurements in Bruce's book and in other tests. Like, I find this intriguing. The AI scientists, they use clinical psychology tests to check out whether AI has personality traits. And they find out that 50% of the AI, that AI can replace only 50% of the creativity jobs. And what does this tell me? If you ask me, from my measurement, 60% of R&D engineers have zero creativity. Still, they are R&D engineers and they are useful and have a purpose. What purpose do they have? They do the incremental innovation. And incremental innovation is something that you cannot think away, because if you have a sales team and suddenly they sell your machine, but with a blue housing instead of a green housing, and the window should be on the lower left corner and not on the upper right corner. Then you need an engineer who can interpret data sheets and understand what is wanted and plan the different painting and the paint and cutting the hole. But all this is incremental innovation. And if something bothers a non-incremental innovator, then is if you assign incremental innovation to him full time. So you need 60 to 80% non-creative R&D engineers, because otherwise you cannot run your R&D. And that's what I say. You need to have the right people for the right job. But when you are done with your engineering school, as I was, I didn't even realize that I'm one of those 20%. Because the guys with whom I was competing for getting the A's in the courses, I would say most of them are are incremental ones with no fantasy. They're just good in passing tests in university, and much better than I've seen very, very intelligent people, much smarter than I am. That was also good. Why university gives you a good measurement of where you stand when it comes to IQ. I'm not a high IQ guy at all.
Yeah, Martin, a moment ago, you talked about the people in R&D that are
Yes.
incremental. I think in the companies where I was full-time early on in my engineering career, we'd call those people either product engineers or application engineers. So the
Okay.
R&D department of three places where I was an R&D guy, the R&D department did not have people that worried about where to move the corner of the window on the airplane or whatever. So
Yeah.
so day-to-day product engineering, some people even call them handbook engineers, or if you've got a catalog for electric motors, they figure out, how many slots to fill in the catalog between 2 horsepower and 20 horsepower. They're product engineers. They're not R&D.
Okay. Okay, now we have the same problem as where we started 4 years ago, right? We wanted to know what is innovation. That I remember still in the first meeting, well, what is innovation? And then I brought up the idea, oh, innovation must come with profit, otherwise it's inventing. And then, oh yeah, innovation must have profit. And then Rich came in and said, yeah, of course it must have. And then he talked down on me, yeah, because I'm a patent attorney, I know nothing about innovation. And so, but today I have at least 10 coordinate systems for classifying innovation and applying them in practice. And now we do the same thing with the people, with the human material.
Okay, Martin. First of all, Rich, for the record, he did say 20 hours. And well, I was shocked too when I heard that. Okay.
That's what I thought. That's what I thought. Thank you.
Yeah, it's also in the transcript, I think, so you can check it or we can check it, no problem. Martin, a few direct questions to you, because
Yes.
we're graduating between innovators, serial innovators in particular, and entrepreneurs. Very simple question. One of the shining figures of industry and technology, Steve Jobs, would you say he's an entrepreneur or is he a serial innovator, or is it both of them? And second question, the two serial innovators whom you described them as one being already retired and the other one functioning or working in his company. So how is this guy integrated? I mean, is he some frustrated serial innovator, or is there some entrepreneur at his side and the team of them, both of them, launch successful products in the market? That's my question, or my questions.
Now, what confirms all the serial innovators that I know, they have a champion in the company. A champion being a guy who protects them from and defends them and takes the fire if something goes wrong.
Yep.
The question is how
That's a
many
must.
times
It doesn't work without that. It
Yeah,
doesn't.
okay.
Otherwise, if you can live without that, then you must take the fire yourself, and that would also mean that you put the capital on the line and also your life. And and then you are more an entrepreneur. So now you ask me, Steve Jobs, is he an entrepreneur or is he a serial innovator? I believe he is both, but at the later stage, he became an entrepreneur very clearly.
Okay, that was the answer which I would have given myself. Okay, he's the archetype of a person uniting two qualities, two great qualities. First of all, he was product engineer and came up with brilliant ideas, and he was one of the very few characters who successfully ran the company, still kept an eye on the technology, but really successfully ran a company until, okay, he was forced out and came back. Okay, we all know the story. And the second question, those guys, or the second serial innovator, how is he performing, and does he need political protection because he comes up with rubbish, or does he need political protection because he has ideas which take a long time to develop, but ultimately are successful in the market? What's his description?
The secret sauce is that all those, and he's not the only one. All those serial innovators, they really deserve the name serial innovators because they can look back on a series on innovation, which always brought profit. Otherwise, it would not be innovation. So they have a success story with several successes and a big success bank account point, a success point account, not bank account, account, something like a social account. They have a standing as someone who produces new things that ultimately will make profit.
Well, hopefully they also have a rich bank account.
No,
If they have
still
such.
innovate a rich bank account. They're just they earn well, not bad, I would say. But they are not like multi-millionaires. Yeah, in very short. And they also don't care so much about money, about driving the latest Mercedes or so, or having a house in an exposed location where everybody envies. So they're not like that because they spend most of the time in a workshop, in the workshop, I would say. And workshop having
So Martin,
yes.
So Martin, we talked about, the first part of the course is people. What's second, third, and fourth?
What second, third, and fourth is what? People. A structure of the course. I believe no. Then we look at the 10 different coordinate systems in order to gauge innovation. So, and the Ansoff matrix would be one. Then there would be tactical approaches like what is a lean startup, for example. If you don't know what the lean startup technology is, then I believe I mean, if you don't practice it, you need to know what it is. Then the S curve is important. Then they would need to learn what is a technology readiness level. Then they would need to learn, and all those practical stuff that you see, and it's both tactical and strategic. And so innovation is not something that you can linearly learn. There's something that has in common with AI. You cannot learn AI because you need to have a lot of experience with different AI technologies, and so you need to look at innovation from many perspectives so that you, after a certain time, get an idea of what the forest is, of what the jungle is. That's where I'm coming from. But I get a much better idea now when I work at it, when just for the lecture about the human material. And if you do an innovation course without teaching human material, then I believe this thing is incomplete because it's like teaching weaponry without talking about ammunition, or the vice versa. Teaching ammunition technology without talking about weapon technology to shoot the ammunition.
Yeah, I think we all agree with that. I think the other thing that you may want to think about is the audience, and is the audience, more thinking along the lines of innovation with regard to software or hard tech, product, right?
Um,
Physical product.
I believe that today, 50% of all innovations have a software aspect. It doesn't matter whether it's hardcore or not. It has. That's my experience. Every second patent that I work with has a software aspect, maybe even more. So
Yeah. I get all that, but there's a real distinction between, in my mindset, is there's a real distinction between, people that are software focused versus hard tech focused.
yeah, because the prototypes are cheaper and faster, right?
Well, yeah, that's part of it, but the other part of it is that, they don't care about, hard tech. They don't care about a physical product. Their mindset is around, because that's where all the money is from a funding standpoint. And my biomedical device, basically had both aspects. It had software, and it had a physical product, and there was technology in that, and so when you sort of couple those things, now you have a hybrid, right? And granted, there's more hybrids today than ever before. I don't disagree with that at all. And that's beautiful. But the issue to me is that, is somebody, inventing the next Scrub Daddy, or are they, talking about AI? Are they talking about, some, SaaS software, solution, right?
Okay.
And those are very different.
Yeah, I believe the innovation that I'm talking about is really something that can fall on your foot.
Yeah, and if that's the case, then you really need to know the audience that you're talking to, because that whole premise, as you just described for the last half hour, could take an ugly turn in the class.
I don't think so, because
Yeah.
if they're really innovative, then this innovativeness would not only show in a technical aspect. That's part of my creativity test I do. The creativity test has, I believe, 30 or maybe 40 questions, and it would test creativity on certain areas of life. I don't even say technical areas, but so areas of life. And I have done roughly 250 personality tests on creativity alone. 250 different patients, no objects, and I found that those people who are highly creative very often have a second, third, and the very creative ones even 4 or 5 areas where they excel in creativity. And those can be from sports over music to dancing to painting to writing to, and then there are also those who do technical products or architecture, and so and and very often you also find areas where those guys are not creative at all. Is for instance, someone maybe a creative engineer, and you find out, oh, I'm talking now about someone that I know. He's also good in music, but he has no creativity in colors. He does the ugliest products that you can imagine. If you don't pair him with a product designer, this thing is hopeless. So, yeah. And at the same time, dancing. He's dancing like a clumsy bear. And yeah, but a very good sportsman. in general when it's about climbing, for example. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, so and also very creative climber. So, so now you have three areas, and this guy is a serial innovator. Yeah, yeah. So and so that's what I say. So I believe if you tickle the the glance of those people, it doesn't really matter whether they work in software. What you could find is that people who are linear thinkers and incremental innovators, that they feel offended and they withdraw or lose trust. Yes. I
So, so can we we have a few minutes left. Can
yeah.
we do a new topic?
Yeah, I tell you about a story about that's another part of how to put this in practice with a company. It's not a new topic, but has nothing to do with the psychology. Is now behavior. When I was 24 years old, I was on an industry deployment from a university in a Windows factory, and the head of the factory, the CEO, was very, very, very creative. And then he developed, and he said, "Today I show you something. This is how I find people for my prototype department." And then he said, "What is it?" And I said, "Oh, I do a 30 days test with the new people that join us." And I say, "For 30 days, you get a real but unsolved problem, and it's taken from our company. And it can be a problem in any part of the company, right? And then he said, I give you access to all the relevant information and resources. You don't get a formal authority over others. You are on your own. And you don't get a special role. You can dedicate roughly 30% of your time onto that problem. The other 70% you must perform as normal, but 70%. You have 30 days, and each week you get a short review with me and the leadership here. And at the end of the 30 days, you give us a presentation and tell us what really has happened. No creativity methods, no training, no protection, nothing. And then there was a young guy from a farm, about just a bit younger than me, start of 20. He grew up on a farm. He learned early that things can break and must work on the next day. And he has a training as a tool maker. In German, that means that you know how to use a lathe and a grinder and what's the English name for Fräse? I always confuse it. It comes. He would know all the tools for turning iron into for shaping steel, yeah, and aluminum and plastic and whatever. So, and he was assigned with a problem. And the funny thing, the other guy who was there was a engineer from a engineering school, not a university engineering school, but a lower engineering school. And the and he was older already, in 27 or so, because army and so here. And then they got the problem. One of the clients wanted a window for balconies in a building that has open balconies, and there's so much wind because it's such a high-rise building that they complained about the wind. And then the young guy, he tried out, and he immediately started. But after finding out what is the real problem, he went there to the building, talked with people. He started with prototypes, and he got his first prototype in the first week, and then more, and then he failed, and then he ran into resistance. And because he didn't have a formal role, everybody was envious that or jealous that he's taking on jobs that the R&D department should do. And then he said, then they told him, "That's not your job." And then they also told him, we have tried it out, it doesn't work. And then even if you succeed with solving it, it doesn't work with our processes. And at the end of the 30 days, he presented what he did. He just told us what would be the logical next step. He didn't present any PowerPoint or any presentation, anything. And he didn't even justify himself. But what we saw is that he didn't require a permission to take over responsibility, and that he is willing to put his head on a chopping block for what he did. And all what he had was the CEO telling him what is the problem and assuring him that he would ask what is the outcome. The other one, the engineer from university, from this not lower rank university, but at the time you only could do a bachelor there, but no masters and PhD. And he did the first thing I remember, he worked for days on a clean definition of the problem, without, and then he did a risk analysis, and then he developed a project plan, and then he had meetings, and then he wanted to have consent of several departments, and then he waited for feedback, and there was no feedback, and then he got resistance, and then they told him, if you don't have the protection of this and that, you cannot do that. Then you will have a problem in the company. And then they postponed him. First, we need to clarify. You cannot have your answer today. And so after 30 days, all what he had was an analysis. He explained to us why it's so difficult, what he has to do. And he had about 100 good reasons why he couldn't do anything so far. Everything logical, and you would see, and nothing has happened. And that is a lighthouse example for me on how to find, sorry to say it again, I believe the serial innovator DNA and the entrepreneur DNA. And that's also why I would recommend that companies would do a similar experiment. So what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting approach. No doubt about it. I've never seen that, but I guess it all depends on the size of the company.
Small one, 200.
Yeah, and if the CEO tells you, that your first 30 days that's what you're doing. Everybody in the company is going to understand that, right? Because
both of these guys, they were there already on the second year, so it's not he just tried out something with and he asked not only those two, but he asked everyone whether they want, but these two came back.
Yeah.
This reminds me a lot of just creating better like team coalescence, where like reading the book Who Moved the Cheese kind of thing, so that way you get everyone to move together. It reminds me of at minimum saying, oh, this person works in that style, that person likes this methodology, and hey, so-and-so over there, they're very risk adverse. Here's how you work with them. So if nothing else, it prevents the inhibit of not knowing how to work with your team.
Yeah, I believe that's a very good comparison, to find those who moved my cheese, two mice, the ones who start exploring what else could we do, and they are soon up in the same way, and then they find their new cheese sauce, yes, and the others not. So it's a similar test probably, but it's so cheap. You ask 200 people, we have this problem, and we promise you can take 30% off for that problem. You can use all the tools, all the machines. We also give you a budget. If you need to buy something, if it's reasonable, then yeah, I will release it. If the CEO says this, it's a very cheap experiment. It's 30 days. But what you do is you test the DNA of the people, and you don't expect a solution. That in 30 days you wouldn't get a solution for that. But what I can tell you is that the engineer from engineering school, he produced something that looked like a garage gate. Ugly. And the prototypes that the young chap from the farm did, he did some movable transparent blinds from a certain type of glass that he found, and it's more like a set of fins of a fish, like the something like that, and you could turn them and then reduce the force of the wind according to where you're sitting, and they didn't block the view. Very light, very not perfect, of course, but the reason why they did this, they didn't want to find out a solution. Of course, they wanted one, but they tried to identify people who are willing to take over responsibility and test
Sure.
them.
Yep. I mean, that's a great way to do it, Martin.
Yeah, and I never thought about it. And actually, I didn't take the opportunity.
Sure.
I had
So-
other
When
stuff
when
to
you
do.
Hey,
when you're
something
offered
I-
the words take responsibility, it also reminds me that in the larger organizations, as you try and innovate and you try and take on a responsibility of something, you're like a turtle that sticks your head out. You're much more likely to get the axe.
Yeah, if you don't have a champion, a protector, yes. Yes, exactly. But yeah, that's why I say people, you should teach this at university level, I believe. That's to Könen, who asked before, why do you do this? Is he still here? No, he left. He left.
Well, they should. I concur. They really should teach, political power and understanding politics in a corporate setting.
Yes.
Because it's so critical. Hey, I wanted to mention an article I happened to see, and I wanted to bring everyone's attention to it. I don't know if everyone or anyone is familiar with a group out of Canada that's called the Innovation Leaders Club Academy.
Okay.
If you're not, Google it. It's a pretty interesting resource.
Yes.
But there's an article written by, and it's just published in February of this year, by Robert Cooper, which is the father of StageGate.
Ah,
And
yes.
Dr. Robert Cooper, to be exact. And it's entitled Accelerated New Product Development, Lessons for Leaders from China Speed by Robert Cooper. And it's about a 17-page article, but basically it's very intriguing because it sort of says that basically the Western powers and the Western companies have all these different tools for speed and advancing development that they aren't using, and the Chinese decided to use them, right?
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah, so it's pretty intriguing in that regard.
Yeah, good. Thank you, Rich. So we also reached the end of our hour. So see you again next week. Thank you again for your feedback. And please take all of you take the test. Do me a favor. Thank you and goodbye.
Yeah, bye.
Goodbye, everyone.
Bye.